The other show I caught today was The Knick, the second episode of The Knick. And once again, I maintain that it is possibly my favorite new TV show of the summer, and I am so pleased that it got renewed for a second season. Whether or not they'll be able to maintain the high standards that they've set with these first two episodes, I don't know. That could just be preemptive speculation, or a little bit too preemptive, considering we're not even halfway through season one yet. But I think one advantage that this episode had over the previous episode that actually ended up making it a little bit better and more engaging, in my opinion, was the fact that the introductions are out of the way. We've established the Knickerbocker Hospital, we've established all of these characters, and in this episode we were really able to hit the ground running with I don't really want to say setup, but really establishing all of these different conflicts with the many different characters. Because in the premiere episode, as good as it was, it did kind of have this this default disadvantage of having to set up this world, this setting, all of these characters, and you can really only devote so much time to each one. As a result, the main focus was Clive Owen's character, and all the other characters were just kind of there to say, "Hey, this is me. I'm here. This is what I do. This is what my deal is. Blah blah blah." But like I said, this one, everything is established already. So like I said, we really hit the ground running. But on that note, everything that was good in the premiere episode remains good here. The acting by the likes of Clive Owen, Andre Holland, Jeremy Bobb, Eve Hewson, Eric Johnson, all of these guys remain very solid, and I think a lot of that has to do not just with the fact that they're talented actors, but with Steven Soderbergh's direction, which also remains very competent here. I mean, he definitely knows how to hold a camera, he definitely knows how to direct his actors, but he also, like I said in the previous video, he knows how to let the scene play, and I think that's what really makes this particular medical drama special, is that Soderbergh, he just lets scenes play. He doesn't really try to use any kind of artificial sleight of hand to try and make something more interesting. Because in terms of script, or if you're watching an operation, you already have something that's engaging to the audience. If you have strong characters and you have them doing something, you don't really need anything else. So the fact that Soderbergh just lets these scenes play or a lot of these scenes play with minimal music, I think really helps the rawness of it, as it were. In addition, we actually got a little bit more insight into the setting this time around, especially with some of the plot lines and kind of fleshing out some of the characters. But what really differentiates this episode from the previous one is not only the fact that we got some of the introductions out of the way, but the fact that we are able to focus on all of these individual conflicts, while at the same time the script ties all these conflicts together into the grand central conflict, which is, the Knickerbocker isn't really doing that well. Their goal is to save lives, but they just do not have the resources. They're not really doing all that great. Financially, equipment-wise, even in terms of specimens, even in terms of bodies to study for future research. They were in pretty dire straits for a lot of reasons, and those reasons, again, form the basis for all of these conflicts that these characters have. For instance, Andre Holland's character, Dr. Edwards, Algernon, he's actually coming face to face with some of the prejudice that Dr. Thackeray said he would get. So as a result, he actually forms a separate branch of the hospital, as it were, in the basement. I mean, his office is even in the basement. They stuck him in the basement instead of giving him the vacant office left by Dr. Christensen, or next to Dr. Christensen. Whatever. They had a vacant office. They didn't give it to him, so they stuck him in the basement. So as a result, he basically sets up his own private office for people who don't necessarily feel, due due to prejudice that they can come to this hospital. Um, so so whether or not he will meet with any hostility for that particular move, I don't know. But but it's a very logical move, especially considering they're not really letting him do anything aside from very basic stuff. Another little mini conflict that we got in this episode was a little bit more insight into Dr. Thackeray's personal challenges, of trying to run the hospital, as it were. He may not be the manager, but he is the chief surgeon. So so he calls Lucy into his office, or at least into a private room, and he basically says, you caught me at a very vulnerable you caught me in a very vulnerable position the other day when you had to inject me and my family jewels with liquid cocaine to get me going. Um, and I would prefer if that stays between us, because I can't really have something like that undermining any kind of authority or respect that I have here. Because as important as I am, I can't really have any of my doctors doubting me, because in turn that would potentially affect our ability to help the patients. We need to run a very organized regime here, and we can't really do that if they're questioning authority or questioning my fitness for duty. Um, so what I found interesting about that little exchange is that some of it, you can tell, has to do with personal pride. Um, the fact that he doesn't necessarily want to look weak, but also he's backing up with a very logical argument of, this could potentially affect our ability to save lives, which he keeps saying is the most important thing to him. In addition to that, we also got the manager of the hospital, Cornelia, having to cope with the fact that she's not exactly doing the best job, not by any fault of hers, but by just sheer lack of resources. Um, she's trying to fill the role of she's trying to fill a role that would normally be reserved for a man, and this was actually one plot line that I felt they could have had a little bit more resolution for. I'm not saying completely resolve it, considering we're only 2 episodes in, but it's something that they do just kind of drop in favor of Jeremy Bob's plotline, Barrow. That actually comes into play when the electricity that the hospital was supposed to have gotten in the last episode keeps flickering and shutting off. And this eventually causes the death of one of the nurses and the setting fire of a patient during a very delicate procedure. So Clive Owen and Cornelia are pissed. They go to Barrow, the manager, and they say, this. I mean, what is wrong with your contractor? And Barrow's like, okay, look, I'll take care of it. No need to call the authorities. No need to involve the courts. So he goes, and it's revealed that Barrow has been getting into shady dealings. He's in massive debt to these pretty unscrupulous people. So as a result, he's not really in that much of a position to be demanding, electricity for the hospital. And once again, seeing that eventually contradict the ultimate goal of saving lives, I think will make for a very interesting series of episodes this season. So, yeah, overall, I really like this episode, much like the last one. We got some more insight into each individual conflict with these characters. Not really a whole lot in the way of character interaction, or not, at least not as much as I would have liked. I mean, they interact here and there, but for the most part, these conflicts remain fairly separate, with the writers basically trusting the viewer to connect them all together in like I said, the overarching conflict of the hospital not doing so well. Yeah, this still remains a pretty strong show. Whether it will continue to remain as strong with future episodes isn't really for me to say.